Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever wondered what it truly takes to build and, sustain a global pharmaceutical giant? Beyond the groundbreaking medicines, there's this whole fascinating world of intricate operations, strategic financial maneuvers, and a deep, often overlooked commitment to the people making it all happen.
Right.
Today, we're taking a deep dive into AbbVie Inc. They're a major player, really shaping the future of healthcare.
And what's truly illuminating here, I think, is that we're not just looking at the company from the outside.
No.
We're basically dissecting its blueprint, drawn straight from their 2024 Form 10K.
The source itself.
Exactly. And this document, it isn't just dry financial numbers. It's really about understanding that intricate dance of, well, innovation, market dynamics, global reach, everything that defines a modern healthcare leader.
That's exactly right. So our mission today is to distill the most important nuggets, the key knowledge and insight from this pretty extensive document.
It's dense.
It is dense. So you'll get a real shortcut to being well-informed about a company that, frankly, impacts lives all around the world. We've got some surprising facts and enough context to keep you hooked. Get ready for some aha moments, because we're about to explore the inner workings of AbbVie, everything from their cutting-edge therapies to their unique corporate culture.
Sounds good.
So to kick things off, let's just get a basic understanding of AbbVie's sheer scale. They're a Delaware corporation headquartered in North Chicago, Illinois. Basic facts.
Right, the basics. And if you connect this to the bigger picture, you really start to grasp the global footprint they command. As of early 2025, AbbVie employs approximately 55,000 people.
Wow.
Yeah, across more than 70 countries. But despite that massive global presence, they strategically operate as a single global business segment.
That's interesting. One segment.
Yeah, which, must streamline a lot of their complex operations, but still quite a feat.
That's an immense workforce. And their market presence is, well, equally significant. Their stock, which if you're looking, you'll find under the symbol ABBV.
ABBV.
Right. It trades on both New York and Chicago stock exchanges. And just to give you a sense of their sheer size, their market value as of June 30th, 2024 was a staggering $300 billion.
$300 billion.
That's a lot of zeros. And really a testament to their position in the global economy.
No question.
Now, let's talk about the heart of any pharmaceutical company. Its product portfolio. And AbbVie's is incredibly diverse. It spans critical areas like immunology, oncology, aesthetics, neuroscience, eye care, plus other key products, too. This isn't just a list of drugs. It's really a strategic ecosystem they've built.
It's an extensive lineup, absolutely. And in immunology, you really see some of their biggest strategic plays. Humira, for instance, a name most people know.
Right. Very well known.
It's been a global blockbuster for years, sold across major markets, Japan, China, Brazil, Australia. You name it, with specific approvals for conditions ranging from, common inflammatory diseases to more rare ones like intestinal Behçet's disease.
But the real story in immunology now, and what really showcases AbbVie's pipeline strategy, it's their next-generation therapies, isn't it?
Exactly. SKYRIZI, for example, that's an interleukin-23 inhibitor, which basically works by targeting a specific protein to reduce inflammation.
Okay.
It's a powerhouse, approved across North America, Europe, Japan for a broad range of inflammatory conditions. Think psoriasis, psoriatic arthritis, and inflammatory bowel diseases like Crohn's and ulcerative colitis.
And the administration is pretty convenient too, right? Quarterly injection or IV?
Yeah, it's quarterly subcutaneous injection or IV infusion for Crohn's or ulcerative colitis makes it a pretty good option for many patients.
Then there's RINVOQ.
Right, RINVOQ. That's an oral, once-daily, selective, and reversible JAK inhibitor.
Okay, JAK inhibitor.
Yeah.
What does that mean in simple terms?
Think of a JAK inhibitor as a kind of targeted therapy. It blocks specific signals inside cells that are associated with inflammation, so more targeted than some older drugs. And RINVOQ has broad approvals in North America, Europe, Japan, for many of the same conditions as SKYRIZI, plus others like rheumatoid arthritis and atopic dermatitis.
What's particularly interesting, I thought, was its availability in a liquid formulation for kids.
Yeah, exactly. RINVOQ-LQ, they call it, for pediatric psoriatic arthritis and polyarticular juvenile idiopathic arthritis. That really broadens its reach significantly.
And what truly stands out looking at their immunology strategy is just the rapid-fire developments around RINVOQ just in 2024. It's quite a year.
It really was. They initiated a phase 3 trial for non-segmental vitiligo. That's a condition causing skin to lose color.
Right.
And they had positive results from trials for giant cell arteritis and atopic dermatitis. They even showed superiority to a competitor drug, dupilumab, in one head-to-head trial for atopic dermatitis.
That's a big claim, superiority.
It is. And they also secured FDA approval for pediatric psoriatic arthritis and submitted new applications for giant cell arteritis. It just demonstrates this really aggressive pursuit of new indications to maximize its market potential before, its own patent life runs out.
Makes sense. Okay, moving to oncology. AbbVie targets some very complex cancers here.
They do. Imbruvica is a key one. It's a Bruton's tyrosine kinase, or BTK, inhibitor,
Okay.
which essentially helps block signals that cancer cells need to grow and survive. It's received multiple special designations from the FDA, and it's approved for adult blood cancers like chronic lymphocytic leukemia, some lymphomas, and also chronic graft versus host disease.
And they also have Epkinly.
Yes, Epkinly. That's a subcutaneous injection used for certain aggressive types of lymphoma, specifically DLBCL and high-grade B-cell lymphoma that have recurred or are resistant to previous treatments. Also for follicular lymphoma.
So really focusing on those tough-to-treat cases.
Exactly. Addressing critical unmet needs in cancer care seems to be a focus there.
Now, let's pivot to something a bit different. Their aesthetics portfolio. Most people, I think, recognize Botox Cosmetic.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Indicated for temporary improvement of common wrinkles, frown lines, crow's feet, forehead lines. It's approved worldwide.
And it even has a specific approval in China for masseter muscle prominence, for facial slimming.
That's right. Which shows how they adapt indications for different markets. And complementing that, you have the Juvederm collection of fillers.
Right, the fillers.
These are hyaluronic acid-based dermal fillers, used to add volume or treat areas like the temples, under the eyes, cheeks, chin, lips, pretty much across major global markets.
So it highlights their strategy to offer a really comprehensive range of non-surgical aesthetic solutions, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And beyond those flagships, their aesthetics offerings also include things like cool sculpting for body contouring.
Yes, cool sculpting.
Natural breast implants, the Skin Medica skincare line, Latisse for eyelashes, Diamond Glow too. They're clearly aiming to be a one-stop shop for aesthetic needs.
Okay, shifting now to neuroscience. Here, AbbVie addresses some very challenging neurologic diseases.
They do. Botox therapeutic, sort of the medical cousin to the cosmetic version, is a key product here.
Right. Different uses.
Completely different uses. In the U.S., it's approved for various medical indications like chronic migraine, overactive bladder, spasticity in adults and kids, cervical dystonia. It's marketed worldwide, though GSK handles it in Japan.
Okay. And then there's Vraylar. That sounds complex.
It is. Vraylar, or cariprazine, it's a dopamine D3-preferring D3D2 receptor partial agonist and a 5-HT1A receptor partial agonist.
Okay, so in simpler terms.
Basically, it acts on specific receptors in the brain, helping to sort of rebalance brain chemistry for conditions like schizophrenia, acute manic episodes, depressive episodes associated with bipolar disorder, and it can be used as an add-on treatment for major depressive disorder.
Wow, that's a broad range of psychiatric indications for one drug.
It is. And what's fascinating here, I think, is their strategic focus on Parkinson's disease.
Right, I saw that. Duopa and Duodopa.
Exactly. These are intestinal gels of carbidopa and levodopa designed for advanced Parkinson's. The idea is to provide more continuous therapy compared to pills, marketed as Duopa in the U.S., Duodopa elsewhere.
So highlighting a shift towards more consistent drug delivery methods for chronic conditions.
Precisely. And then there's Ubrelvy. That's a CGRP receptor antagonist.
Okay, CGRP, that's the migraine protein blocker, right?
You got it. Blocks the protein involved in migraine pain. Ubrelvy is for acute migraine treatment. It's commercialized in the U.S., Israel, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Canada.
And its sibling drug is Qulipta.
Right, Qulipta or atogepant, another CGRP receptor antagonist, but this one is for the preventive treatment of episodic and chronic migraine, approved in the U.S., Canada, and as Aquipta in the EU.
So that pair shows a really comprehensive approach to migraine, doesn't it? Prevention and acute treatment.
It does. And their neuroscience portfolio also includes Vyalev or Porduodopa outside the U.S.
Another Parkinson's drug.
Yes. This one is a subcutaneous, so under the skin, 24-hour infusion of a levodopa-based therapy, again, for advanced Parkinson's, focusing on continuous delivery.
The recent neuroscience developments really show the high-stakes nature of drug development, though. Lots of ups and downs.
Absolutely. So January 2024, they launched Produodopa in Europe. Good news. But then in June 2024, a setback from the FDA for its U.S. equivalent, Vyalev.
What happened there?
The FDA cited observations at a third-party manufacturer. Importantly, though, it wasn't about the drug's safety or efficacy data.
Okay, so a manufacturing issue, not a drug issue.
Right. And the good news followed because in October 2024, the FDA did approve Vyalev, and it's the first and only subcutaneous 24-hour infusion of levodopa-based therapy. That's a major win for patients with advanced Parkinson's.
That is a big deal, a new continuous treatment option.
Definitely. They also had promising phase 3 results for another Parkinson's drug, tavapadon, this one for early Parkinson's disease. So pipeline progress there.
But then there was some disappointing news too, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was. In November 2024, a schizophrenia drug candidate called emraclidine. Well, it didn't meet its primary endpoint in phase 2 trials.
Ouch.
Yeah. And that led to a significant impairment charge, basically a write-down of its value. It really underscores the inherent uncertainty and risk in R&D. Even for a giant like AbbVie, not everything pans out.
Absolutely. It's a constant reminder, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not every drug makes it, even after pouring tons of money into it.
Yeah.
Okay, moving to eye care. AbbVie's products here are designed to, well, preserve and protect vision.
Right. Ozurdex is a key one. It's a dexamethasone, a corticosteroid intravitreal implant, so injected into the eye.
Okay.
Used worldwide for conditions like diabetic macular edema, DME, and macular edema following retinal vein occlusion. Also non-infectious uveitis.
They also offer Lumigan, right, for glaucoma.
Yes. Lumigan is a bimatoprost solution for reducing elevated eye pressure in open-angle glaucoma or ocular hypertension. And Ganfort is a combination product, bimatoprost plus timolol, also for glaucoma pressure, approved in many parts of the world like the EU, South America, Asia.
So a focus on managing chronic eye conditions there.
Mm-hmm.
And Restasis, that's another well-known name.
It is. Restasis is a calcineurin inhibitor immunosuppressant. Basically, an eye drop to increase tear production if it's reduced due to ocular inflammation, like in dry eye disease. Approved in the U.S. and other key markets.
And other eye care products, too.
Yeah, a few others. Common artificial tears like Refresh and Optiv, plus specialized implants like Zen and Durista. So covering a pretty broad range of ophthalmic needs.
Okay. And finally, in their sort of other key products category, it's a bit of a mix, right?
It is. Includes treatments for hepatitis C, or HCV. Also metabolic and hormone products, like those for exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, that's where Creon fits in, and hypothyroidism. Plus endocrinology products for conditions like advanced prostate cancer, endometriosis.
Creon, you mentioned, that's the pancreatic enzyme therapy.
Yes, pancrelipase. But what's key here is AbbVie only holds the rights to sell it in the United States.
Ah, okay, interesting restriction. And Linzess.
Linzess, or Constella outside the U.S., that's linaclotide. It's a once-daily drug for irritable bowel syndrome with constipation, IBS-C, and also chronic idiopathic constipation.
So it's clear their portfolio isn't just broad, but its market reach for each product is really carefully managed geographically, isn't it?
Absolutely. Licensing deals, regional rights. It's all part of the complex global strategy.
Okay, let's turn our attention to how AbbVie actually operates, how they market and sell these products globally. It must be a massive, intricately coordinated undertaking.
Oh, undoubtedly. And what's truly strategic here, I think, is their approach to market and distribute products worldwide. AbbVie uses this combination of dedicated internal teams, regional commercial resources, and external distributorships.
So a flexible model.
Very flexible. It allows them to adapt to diverse market needs and different healthcare systems across the globe.
And who are they targeting with their marketing?
Well, primarily, their efforts are geared towards securing prescriptions or recommendations from the medical community. So physicians, external experts, other healthcare providers. But important customers also include large managed care providers, think HMOs, pharmacy benefit managers, or PBMs,
Right.
as well as hospitals and government agencies like state Medicaid programs in the U.S., the VA, Department of Defense.
And they do direct-to-consumer advertising, too, at least in the U.S.
They do, especially for products like Botox Cosmetic, where brand awareness is key. But for most of their pharmaceutical pipeline, obviously, a prescription is still required. Outside the U.S., the focus shifts more towards those external experts, payers, the organizations reimbursing for drugs and health systems.
And they also have patient support programs?
Critically, yes, closely related to their products. They recognize that patients often need more than just the medication itself. Support, education, access help.
Makes sense. Now, when it comes to actually getting the drugs out there Distribution.
Hmm.
How does that work?
In the U.S., they primarily work through just a few large independent wholesale distributors. McKesson, Cardinal Health, Cencora. You know the big names.
Right, the major players.
These few wholesalers accounted for substantially all of their pharmaceutical sales in 2024. Though, interestingly, no single one dominated more than 39% of their gross revenues.
So concentrated but not totally dependent on one.
Exactly. Internationally, sales are mostly to wholesalers or through distributors. And reimbursement terms often get negotiated directly with centralized national payer systems in many countries. It's a really complex global web designed to get their products to patients efficiently.
And they sometimes partner with other companies. Co-marketing.
Yes, they engage in collaborations, co-marketing, or co-promoting certain products with other companies. It helps leverage shared resources or expertise. What's important to note, especially for investors, is that the 10K states the loss of any single customer wouldn't materially harm the company.
Okay, that's reassuring diversification.
Right. And no significant portion of their business is subject to arbitrary profit renegotiation or contract termination by governments. Also, their order backlog isn't material, which suggests a pretty nimble, efficient operation, not one sitting on massive unfulfilled orders.
Now let's talk about the intense world of competition they navigate.
Yeah.
Because the markets for AbbVie's products are, well, not surprisingly, fiercely competitive.
Oh, incredibly so. They face off against other big research-based pharmaceutical and biotechnology companies. Everyone's constantly discovering, manufacturing, marketing, selling new drugs and biologics.
Can you give some examples?
Sure. Their blockbuster immunology products like SKYRIZI and RINVOQ, they compete directly with other anti-TNF products, other JK inhibitors. In oncology, Imbruvica is up against other BTK inhibitors. And even for something seemingly dominant like Botox, they face competition from companies developing similar aesthetic products.
So this raises an important question, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How does a company like AbbVie maintain and grow market share amidst such aggressive innovation and these rapid product cycles?
It really boils down to a relentless focus on a few key things. Technological innovation, obviously. The introduction of new competitor products, which forces them to adapt. Changes in medical practices. And, of course, price. Price is always huge.
And the threat of generics and biosimilars must be massive.
Absolutely. Generic and biosimilar substitution creates particularly significant competitive pressure. It often leads to rapid price reductions and decreases in sales volume almost overnight, as we saw with Humira. It's a constant battle to stay ahead. Their success really hinges on continuously bringing novel therapies to market before competitors do, or before their own patents expire.
So how do they stay ahead? Through that robust research and development process, right? That's the lifeblood.
Exactly. R&D is everything. It generally kicks off with discovery research, trying to identify molecules that might work against specific diseases. If preclinical testing, lab and animal tests, looks promising.
Then it moves into humans.
Right, into clinical development, which has those distinct phases. Phase 1 is the first time in humans, usually a small number of healthy volunteers or patients. Focuses on safety, tolerability, finding the right doses.
Okay, phase 1, safety.
Then phase 2. Here, they test different drug doses in people who actually have the disease state. The goal is to assess efficacy, basically. Does it look like it works? And get more safety data.
Phase 2. Does it work?
And if those results look good, you move to phase 3. These are much larger trials, significantly more patients, often global. The aim is to further demonstrate efficacy and safety definitively, enough to meet the requirements for regulatory approval around the world.
Phase 3. Prove it works safely in lots of people.
Exactly. And the data from all these development phases, preclinical, phase 1, 2, 3, it's all meticulously compiled. It forms the basis for submitting a new drug application, an NDA, or a biological license application, a BLA, to regulatory agencies like the FDA in the US or similar bodies elsewhere.
And the requirements differ everywhere.
Oh, yes. Specific requirements vary quite a bit by country or region. What's truly striking, though, is the sheer length and inherent uncertainty of this whole process.
How long does it usually take?
Typically 8 to 12 years, sometimes even longer. And there's absolutely no guarantee of regulatory approval at the end. Think about that over a decade of work. Huge investment.
With no assured return. That's incredible risk.
It is. An enormous investment of time and capital. And even after approval, it doesn't stop. There are often phase 4 trials or post-marketing studies to collect additional data on the drug's benefits and risks out in the real world once many more people are using it.
Right, ongoing monitoring.
Yeah.
Now, beyond R&D, AbbVie faces this incredibly complex global regulatory landscape. In the U.S., the FDA is the big one, right?
Absolutely. The FDA tightly regulates everything from product labeling to prohibiting the promotion of products for unapproved or off-label uses.
And these kinds of stringent regulations extend globally.
They do. AbbVie faces similar strict requirements for approval and marketing all over the world. In the European Union, for instance, they have a centralized procedure. For many products, especially biotech ones, this provides a single marketing authorization that's valid across all EU member states. It's evaluated by the European Medicines Agency, the EMA.
One approval for the whole EU, that's sufficient.
It can be. There's also a decentralized procedure for mutual recognition of national approvals. In Japan, applications go through the Pharmaceutical and Medical Devices Agency, or PMDA. They usually require specific trials or bridging studies just for Japanese patients.
Japan-specific data needed.
Often, yes. The PMDA then reports to the Ministry of Health, Labor, and Welfare for the final okay. In China, applications go to the Center for Drug Evaluation, and clinical data in Chinese subjects are typically required there too. Each major market has its own hurdles.
And what about emerging market?
If we connect this to the bigger picture for emerging markets, many generally require regulatory approval from a large developed market like the US or EU first. Some, like South Korea, Taiwan, India, Russia, also typically require local clinical studies.
So layers upon layers of approvals.
Exactly. And beyond the initial approval, those post-approval obligations are ongoing and critical. Things like adverse event reporting, strict compliance with good manufacturing practices, CGMP and pharmacovigilance measures, like risk management plans in Europe, which are all about continuously monitoring drug safety once it's on the market.
It's really not just about getting approved, is it? It's staying compliant at every single step.
Precisely. All aspects, manufacturing, marketing, sales, promotion, distribution, they're all under comprehensive government regulation by various national, regional, federal, state, local agencies globally.
And that oversight touches, well, everything.
Literally everything. From inspecting research labs and procedures to clinical investigations, product approvals, the manufacturing process itself, labeling, packaging, marketing claims, promotion, pricing, reimbursement policies, sampling practices, distribution channels, quality control, post-marketing surveillance, record keeping, storage, even disposal. It's a truly all-encompassing regulatory environment.
And there are even more layers of regulation.
Oh, yes. You've got trade regulations that can limit imports of raw materials or finished products, anti-corruption and anti-bribery laws, think the U.S. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, the FCPA, or the U.K. Bribery Act. Very important for global companies.
Right, those are serious.
And healthcare fraud and abuse laws, like anti-kickback statutes and false claims laws, particularly in the U.S. Plus, prescription drug manufacturers face various specific taxes and fees that add to their operating costs.
So, this raises an important question. What happens if these extensive regulations are actually violated?
The consequences can be incredibly severe. We're talking potential criminal and/or civil sanctions. That could mean substantial fines, even imprisonment for individuals. Exclusion from participation in federal and state health care programs like Medicare and Medicaid, which could be a death blow for some products.
Ew.
Plus, product recalls or seizures, interruption of production, import bans, delays in getting new products approved, and, of course, significant, long-lasting reputational harm. The stakes are just astronomically high.
It really is a high-stakes, high-regulation industry. Okay, let's shift gears and dive into the numbers. AbbVie's financial health and the associated risk factors. Looking at their overall revenue performance for 2024.
Right. Total net revenues increased about 3.7%, came in at nearly $56.3 billion in 2024, up from just over $54.3 billion in 2023. Solid growth.
And what's fascinating there is the geographic breakdown of that growth.
Yeah, U.S. revenues saw a more modest increase, about 2.7%, landing around $43 billion. But international revenues increased a more significant 7%, hitting approximately $13.3 billion.
So stronger international momentum, perhaps.
It indicates varied market dynamics, maybe stronger uptake, or launches internationally for certain key products driving that difference.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting when we look at specific product revenue shifts. Because in immunology, Humira, wow, once the undisputed king, experienced a dramatic decrease, nearly 38% globally, down to about $9 billion.
Almost 40%.
And in the U.S. alone, it was down over 41%. This massive decline isn't just a number on a page, it's a really stark illustration of the patent cliff.
That dreaded patent cliff.
Exactly. It's that phenomenon where a blockbuster drug loses most of its revenue almost overnight because of generic, or in this case, biosimilar competition entering the market.
Brutal. But that decline in Humira revenue, largely due to those biosimilars, it highlights the critical challenge. But what AbbVie did next is the real story, right?
That's the key. How did they respond? Well, SKYRIZI saw a substantial increase, over 50% growth, to nearly $11.7 billion.
50%. That's huge growth for an already large drug. Massive. Driven by strong market share uptake and market growth across all its indications. U.S. sales up almost 50%. International sales leaped by over 61%. It really shows a successful pivot, managing that transition.
And RINVOQ, too. Similar story.
Very similar. RINVOQ also showed impressive growth, increasing over 50% to nearly $6 billion. Primarily due, again, to continued market share uptake and market growth. U.S. revenues up 50.8%, international up almost 50%.
So it's a clear illustration, isn't it? A company successfully navigating those patent expirations by launching new blockbusters to fill the revenue void left by the older one.
Textbook execution, really, of a lifecycle management strategy in pharma. Now, in oncology, IMBRUVICA global revenues decreased about 7%.
Okay, a bit of a dip there.
Yeah, due to decreased demand and lower market share in the U.S., plus decreased collaboration revenues. However, Venclexta increased a healthy 16%. And Elahere, which came from the Immunology acquisition,
Right, the acquisition.
generated almost $480 million in 2024. So that demonstrates growth and new opportunities emerging in other cancer treatment areas, even as one product faces pressure.
Okay, moving to aesthetics. Botox Cosmetic. How did that do?
Saw a slight increase, just over 1%, to nearly $2.7 billion. U.S. growth was driven mainly by favorable pricing, but that was partially offset by some inventory destocking by customers and maybe decreased consumer demand.
Interesting dynamics.
International growth, however, was a bit stronger, nearly 3%, primarily from favorable pricing and maybe increased consumer demand outside the U.S.
But in contrast, the Juvederm fillers.
Yeah, that decreased almost 15%, down to about $1.18 billion. The 10K points primarily to decrease consumer demand and customer inventory destocking.
So that really shows the sensitivity of some aesthetic products to broader economic trends and consumer spending habits, doesn't it?
It certainly seems more sensitive than, say, life-saving oncology drugs. Now, in neuroscience, Botox therapeutic increased almost 10% to nearly $3.3 billion, driven by continued market share uptake and market growth.
And Vraylar.
Vraylar saw an over 18% increase, also hitting nearly $3.3 billion. Again, due to market share uptake and market growth. Really strong performance there.
Obrilvi, the acute migraine drug.
Increased over 23% to just over $1 billion. Market share uptake, market growth, highlighting its strong position.
And Clipta, the preventive one.
What's fascinating here is Qulipta saw truly impressive growth, over 61%, to nearly $660 million, driven by strong market share uptake and market growth.
61%, wow.
Yeah, these are significant gains that really solidify their neuroscience portfolio as a major new growth driver for the company.
Okay, let's talk gross margin, because it tells an interesting story about their efficiency and maybe the impact of past decisions. Gross margin as a percentage of net revenues increased to 70% in 2024. That's up significantly from 62% in 2023.
That's a big jump. And this favorable impact was primarily due to lower intangible asset impairment charges.
Impairment charges, remind us what those are.
Think of them as a write-down of the value of assets that aren't tangible, like patents or acquired drug candidates that didn't pan out as expected or lost value. In 2023, those charges were a massive $3.6 billion.
$3.6 billion write-down in 1 year.
Yeah. So a reduction in those kinds of charges in 2024 significantly boosted their reported margin. It could indicate better portfolio management, fewer R&D disappointments hitting the books that year, or just timing.
Got it. They also had significant acquired IP R&D and milestones expenses, almost $2.8 billion in 2024.
Right. And this isn't just spending money. You have to see this as AbbVie's primary strategy to refill its pipeline and fuel future growth. They are aggressively buying promising early-stage assets from other companies. It's how they plan to offset hits from expiring patents like Humira's.
So acquisitions are key to their future.
Absolutely. This includes substantial upfront payments, like $1.4 billion for Aliada Therapeutics, $250 million for Celsius Therapeutics, mentioned in the 10K. It shows they're not just relying on internal innovation, but heavily leveraging external biotech innovation through these strategic acquisitions and licensing deals.
Okay. Their income tax expense. That looked quite volatile. The effective income tax rate was actually a negative 15% in 2024.
Yeah, negative 15%. That's remarkable, down from 22% in 2023 and 12% in 2022. A negative tax rate means they essentially received a tax benefit for the year on their reported earnings.
How does that happen?
Well, the 10K attributes this fluctuation largely to how taxable earnings are allocated across different countries with different tax rates, various discrete factors, and specific events like changes in tax law or business development activities. The lower 2024 rate was primarily due to resolutions of various tax positions from multiple prior tax years, including closing out U.S. IRS examinations.
Ah, so settling old tax issues gave them a benefit in 2024.
Seems like it played a big part. It really highlights the complex, constantly shifting landscape of global corporate taxation for multinationals.
Okay, looking at cash flows. Operating activities decreased a bit, down to about $18.8 billion in 2024 from nearly $22.8 billion in 2023. Why the drop?
Primarily due to the timing of working capital, inventory, receivables, payables, and also higher contingent consideration payments.
Contingent consideration. Those are payments tied to the future success of acquired assets, right?
Exactly. Payments made when milestones are hit on drugs they bought, and those are classified as operating cash flows. So higher payments there reduced operating cash flow, even though it was partially offset by increased results from operations due to the higher net revenues overall.
Now, what's fascinating here is the massive shift in investing activities. They used over $20.8 billion in cash for investing in 2024. That's way up from about $2 billion in 2023.
Huge increase. That clearly indicates very substantial investments being made in their future, likely reflecting the cash outflows for those big R&D acquisitions and licensing deals we just discussed, pouring money into the pipeline.
Makes sense. Meanwhile, financing activities used about $5.2 billion in 2024, which is actually a significant decrease from over $17.2 billion used in 2023.
Right. So less cash used for things like paying down debt or buying back stock compared to the previous year suggests less reliance on external financing or maybe different capital allocation priorities in 2024.
Okay. Regarding their debt and capital structure, they have quite a bit of long-term debt, don't they?
They do. Around $66.8 billion as of December 31st, 2024, including the current portion. Managing such a large debt load alongside their other liabilities is obviously a key financial task.
And speaking of liabilities, those contingent consideration liabilities, they're also substantial.
Very substantial, totaled a hefty $21.6 billion as of December 31st, 2024. That's a big future obligation tied to the success of their acquisitions.
But on a positive note, Moody's gave them an upgrade on their outlook.
Yes, in August 2024, Moody's Investors Service affirmed their A3 senior unsecured long-term rating, which is investment grade, and revised its outlook to positive from stable.
So Moody's thinks things are looking up.
That positive outlook is indeed a strong endorsement. It suggests the credit rating agency believes AbbVie is well-positioned to manage its financial obligations, handle the Humira transition, and continue its growth trajectory, a good sign for their financial stability.
And when it comes to shareholder value, AbbVie seems pretty focused on it. They increased their dividend again.
They did. The board declared an increase in the quarterly dividend up from $1.55 per share to $1.64 per share, announced October 30th, 2024. Of course, the 10K reminds us dividends are always discretionary, dependent on financial health, earnings, etc.
Standard disclaimer.
Yeah.
And they're still buying back stock.
Yes, they have an ongoing stock repurchase program. As of the end of 2024, AbbVie had $3.5 billion remaining in its authorization. They actually repurchased 7 million shares for $1.3 billion during 2024.
So showing an ongoing commitment to returning value to shareholders that way too.
Exactly, by reducing the number of outstanding shares. However, it's always worth noting, as the 10K does, that future equity issuances, maybe for raising capital, employee awards, acquisitions, or issuing preferred stock, that could potentially dilute existing stockholder ownership and voting power.
Right. Always a factor for investors to keep in mind. Now, every company, especially one of AbbVie's scale, has significant risks. And for a global biopharmaceutical giant, those risks are incredibly complex, multifaceted.
Oh, absolutely. And what's truly fascinating, or perhaps terrifying if you're running the company, is that omnipresent risk of patent expiration.
The big one.
It's the sword of Damocles for pharma. As patents expire, AbbVie faces that direct competition from lower-priced generic or biosimilar products. We saw it starkly with Humira. Loss of exclusivity led to that significant sales reduction very quickly. It's a constant threat that really drives their intensive R&D and acquisition strategy.
And it's not just their own patents expiring. Competitor innovation is a huge factor too, right?
Right. Massive. New products and technological advances from competitors could negatively affect AbbVie's results if they are, safer, more effective, lower priced, or just have better features. Plus, consolidation among other pharma companies can enhance their competitive advantages, creating an ever-shifting landscape AbbVie has to navigate.
The manufacturing and supply chain also present substantial risks, I imagine. It sounds incredibly complex.
It is. The manufacturing process for biologics especially is highly complex, very susceptible to issues. Equipment malfunctions, problems with raw materials, capacity limits, disruptions anywhere in the supply chain, natural disasters. What's more, their reliance on single suppliers for certain critical raw materials creates significant vulnerabilities. If that one supplier has a problem,
Production could halt.
potentially, yes, or be severely delayed. And they also have significant dependence on third-party service providers for everything from R&D contract research organizations to manufacturing partners to commercialization and IT support.
So they rely on others heavily.
They do. And if these third parties fail to perform or are non-compliant with regulations, it could materially impact AbbVie's operations. It really highlights the interconnectedness and the potential fragility of their global business model. This raises an important question. How does a company this size manage the extensive product liability and litigation risk they inevitably face?
Right. They must get sued a lot.
AbbVie is subject to product liability claims, recalls, various lawsuits, intellectual property disputes are common, commercial claims, securities litigation. The 10K notes they actually self-insure for a significant portion of product liability losses.
Meaning they set aside their own funds rather than relying solely on external insurance.
Exactly, which shows the scale of potential liability they anticipate. The 10K mentions specific examples like ongoing antitrust litigation related to some older products, class actions regarding drug pricing, breast implant litigation from acquisitions, and patent infringement lawsuits involving key current drugs like RINVOQ. It's a constant legal battlefront.
And beyond litigation, that government regulation and healthcare law environment poses another substantial risk layer.
Huge risk. The industry is so extensively regulated. Anti-kickback laws, false claims laws, privacy regulations like ATI, violations can lead to those severe criminal or civil sanctions we talked about, huge fines, exclusion from Medicare, Medicaid. It's a compliance tightrope they walk every single day.
And operating globally adds even more risks.
Definitely. International business subjects them to things like currency exchange rate fluctuations. Almost a quarter of their 2024 net revenues came from outside the U.S., so shifts in exchange rates can really impact the reported results.
Yeah, 24% is significant exposure.
Plus, risks from changes in tax laws globally, like that OECD Pillar 2 Global Minimum Tax Initiative, political and economic instability in certain regions, conflicts, sovereign debt issues, price and currency exchange controls imposed by foreign governments, and penalties under those anti-corruption laws like FCPA and the UK Bribery Act. Lots to worry about internationally.
And even if they get a groundbreaking product through R&D and approved, commercialization itself has its own challenges, right? It's not automatic success.
Not at all. The success of new products relies heavily on creating market demand, achieving acceptance from physicians and patients, having efficient manufacturing scaled up, and effective supply chain delivery. Unexpected challenges can pop up anytime maybe new safety concerns emerge after launch, or the pricing relative to alternatives isn't seen favorably by payers. Any of that can severely hinder commercialization, even for an otherwise effective drug.
And what about cybersecurity? That seems like a huge risk for everyone these days.
What's fascinating here is their stated dependence on information technology and cybersecurity. AbbVie relies heavily on sophisticated IT systems, including cloud services now. That makes them inherently vulnerable to cyber attacks, data breaches, system disruptions.
Have they been hit badly?
The 10K says they haven't been materially impacted yet, but acknowledges the healthcare industry remains a prime target for cybercriminals. And the increasing use of artificial intelligence, AI, also introduces new risks, potential biases in analyses, data privacy issues.
So what are they doing about it?
Well, they state they have a comprehensive cybersecurity program following industry best practices like the NIST framework. They do regular assessments, employee training, and maintain cybersecurity insurance. But the threat is ever present and constantly evolving.
And one last risk mentioned, Counterfeit drugs.
Yes, the presence of counterfeit or diverted drugs sold under AbbVie's brand name is a very real risk. It can harm their reputation, undermine patient trust and safety, obviously, and also reduce their legitimate revenues. It's truly a multi-layered, interconnected risk environment they operate in.
Absolutely. Okay, moving on to how AbbVie is structured and led, let's talk about their corporate governance framework.
Right. And they're pretty transparent here. You can find all their corporate governance guidelines, the qualifications they look for in directors, their code of business conduct, the charters for all the key board committees, audit, compensation, nominations and governance, public policy, and sustainability. It's all publicly available on their investor relations website.
That level of transparency is generally seen as a hallmark of strong governance, isn't it?
It is. Now, what's fascinating structurally is their board setup. It's a classified board, meaning it's divided into 3 classes, with only one class up for election each year.
Staggered board elections.
Exactly. Directors are elected by a majority of votes cast. Unless it's a contested election, then it's plurality. And directors can only be removed for cause by stockholders. This structure, plus certain high vote requirements for amending their corporate documents, like needing an 80% affirmative vote of outstanding stock for changes related to the board, makes it pretty difficult for outside parties to gain control quickly.
So these elements are also part of their anti-takeover provisions to prevent hostile takeovers.
Largely, yes. Certain provisions in Delaware law, where they're incorporated specifically Section 203, already prohibit business combinations with interested stockholders for 3 years unless the board approves. And AbbVie's own certificate of incorporation and bylaws add layers to that. That classified board, the for-cause removal standard, the high vote requirements for key amendments, restrictions on who can call special stockholder meetings. It's all designed to deter coercive takeover practices and encourage potential acquirers to negotiate directly with the board.
Ensures stability, but also makes it harder for shareholders to force major changes quickly.
That's the trade-off, yes. Now, the leadership transition at AbbVie has been a pretty significant event recently.
Right, the CEO change.
Richard A. Gonzalez, who had been chairman and CEO since AbbVie spun off from Abbott back in 2013, he retired as CEO in June 2024. He became executive chairman of the board then.
But he's not staying on the board long term.
No, he's set to retire from the board entirely in July 2025. So it seems like a well-planned, carefully managed succession over a couple of years.
And his successor is Robert A. Michael.
Yes, he stepped into the CEO role on July 1st, 2024, and joined the board the same day. What's interesting, and often a good sign, is his long tenure and clear progression within the company. He held various senior finance leadership positions, then became president and chief operating officer before getting the top CEO job.
So promoted from within after many years.
Exactly. And then in February 2025, the board unanimously elected him to succeed Mr. Gonzalez as chairman of the board as well, effective July 1st, 2025. That completes the leadership transition at the very top.
And beyond the top 2, a broad leadership team.
Oh, yes. The 10K lists other key executive officers, the Chief Human Resources Officer, the EVP of R&D and Chief Scientific Officer, the General Counsel, the Chief Commercial Officer. It's a broad and experienced leadership team. And importantly, the filing notes there are no family relationships between any of the listed executive officers.
Which usually points to a merit-based system, right?
Generally considered a positive governance sign, yes. All this really brings us to human capital management, which is something AbbVie really emphasizes in the 10K as being foundational to their success.
Makes sense in a knowledge-based industry.
Absolutely. They stress that attracting, retaining, and developing their, approximately 55,000 employees is absolutely critical to their ability to make that global impact they talk about, especially in a field like pharmaceuticals where talent is everything.
So how do they invest in their employees? What does the 10K say?
Well, what's truly fascinating here is the breadth of their investment. It's not just competitive compensation, which you'd expect. It's comprehensive benefits, medical, dental, retirement, disability, life insurance. But beyond that standard stuff, they offer robust support programs focused on health promotion, mental health awareness, employee assistance programs, even financial wellness education.
And things like on-site health screenings, fitness centers.
Yes, they mention providing those at several locations. It demonstrates a more holistic approach to employee well-being, not just focusing on work output.
And they have specific financial support programs, too, like scholarships.
They do. They highlight things like the AbbVie Possibilities Scholarship for Children of Employees and an employee relief program that provides financial assistance during natural disasters or personal hardships. That shows a real commitment to supporting their people beyond just their direct work contributions.
That's quite comprehensive. What about talent development? How do they grow their people?
Their strategies seem pretty comprehensive there, too. They focus on attracting and developing high-performing talent, particularly in STEM fields, obviously, and critical skill sets like drug discovery, market access, data science. This includes tailored onboarding processes, mentorship programs, structured development opportunities. They mention a Learn, Develop, Perform program and specific professional development programs aimed at new graduates.
So investing in the pipeline of talent internally.
Exactly, which raises an important question, doesn't it? How do these deep internal investments in talent actually translate into the kind of breakthrough innovation and business resilience we see from a company like AbbVie, especially when facing things like patent cliffs?
Which leads right into their culture, I suppose. The 10K talks about culture built on shared principles.
Yes. Transforming lives, acting with integrity, driving innovation, embracing diversity and inclusion, serving the community. Those are the stated principles. These values are articulated in what they call the ways we work.
Ways we work.
Yeah, described as a core set of working behaviors that emphasize how results are achieved, not just what results are achieved. The goal is to foster strong employee engagement, which they say they measure regularly through confidential surveys, trying to create a culture where people feel valued and motivated.
And diversity and inclusion is a big part of that.
Seems to be a cornerstone. They underscore their commitment to fostering an inclusive workforce with equal opportunity, non-discrimination, and pay equity, which they state they analyze annually. They focus on instilling an inclusive mindset in leaders and employees, supported by various employee resource groups, or ERGs.
The goal being to realize the full value of that diverse workforce.
That's the idea articulated in the filing. From recruitment all the way through retirement, it's presented not just as the right thing to do, but as integral to their innovative capacity and business success.
Okay, so wrapping this all up.
If we connect all these threads to the bigger picture, you've really seen how AbbVie navigates these immense challenges, haven't you? From the dramatic shifts caused by patent expirations like Humira
Right.
and aggressive competition, to those evolving global regulations and the inherent massive uncertainty of drug development itself. Yet through all that, they continue to drive significant growth in new therapeutic areas. It's this constant high-wire act of balancing immense risk and hopefully rewarding innovation.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me, though. What truly stands out from digging into this 10K is that deep, interwoven investment in both scientific innovation and human capital.
They seem linked.
It feels like it's not just about the molecules they discover or the market share they capture. It's also fundamentally about the people who discover them, develop them, bring them to market, and ensure the company thrives amidst all that intense scrutiny and competitive pressure. Their ability to manage this complex interplay seems absolutely key to their enduring success.
Which really raises an important final question, doesn't it? In an industry so singularly focused, often, on breakthrough science and complex financial maneuvers, how do companies like AbbVie sustain that commitment to core values and employee well-being as truly foundational elements of their long-term success, especially when the short-term pressures from the market, from competition, from investors are so incredibly intense?
That's a powerful thought for you, our listeners, to mull over. How might a company's internal culture, its investment in its people, ultimately influence its ability to innovate, to be resilient, and to navigate the ever-changing high-stakes landscape of global healthcare? Keep exploring.